Jennie.
Lex.
Tristan.
And Tristan.
Yeah, welcome. So this is my first inmate, so I'm like pretty nervous in real life. So, but yeah, so today we're gonna talk about why do we need so many chains. So it really starts with I guess Bitcoin. So today we only have logos on there. Bitcoin. So why do we need so many chains?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, basically because the Bitcoin blockchain, which was the first kind of most successful blockchain, there's a lot of things that it can't do in terms of some of the more cutting edge stuff that you might have heard about NFTs and DeFi. Bitcoin wasn't necessarily built for that. So there's a lot of different applications that different blockchains do. They also vary in the speed and the transaction throughput, so how much volume the chain can handle. And basically, I guess to sum it up, they all have different things they're good at, so you kind of got to weigh the pros and cons, and whatever you are intending to do with blockchain, a different chain might be more suitable to your needs.
Yeah, okay, so I think I missed the first question. I guess the first question will be, what is a blockchain?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. And I want to address this question to the audience. And who can formulate, define a blockchain in one word, the essence of it?
Database.
Exactly. It's a database.
Yeah.
Blockchain is a database. It's a distributed database. And
It's a file on a hard drive, isn't it? No. Fundamentally, it's a file. I used to run a node, right?
It's a file on many different hard
Yeah,
drives.
it's not a file, it's a distributed network. So everyone could have the file, which is the...
But that's a distributed blockchain.
I think,
Yeah, well, blockchain is a network, it's a database of many transactions.
yeah, I think
it's a record
I think actually it is both, because you can view the blockchain as a network, right? But also you can view it as a local database you have on your computer, like full node, you can query and extract data from. But in general, blockchain is distributed network.
the keyword is network. So if I would put it in as an analogy, I think every blockchain is one universe, and then we can dive deep into that when we show the first graph. But you can just think of blockchain as a universe, and then every blockchain is a different universe, basically. Would you say that's
Yeah. Well, it first started so Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and then there were multiple forks of Bitcoin. So Dogecoin, Litecoin, but it's only for sending money, right? So then in 2013, Vitalik introduced Ethereum, which is not only it's a Turing complete system, so it can run any, not any, but a lot of other stuff than just sending. So these introduce smart contracts. So Ethereum is a smart contract platform. So you can not only send money, but you can also run programs on there. And then, so Ethereum is not as scalable as it wished to be. So then they introduced many other Ethereum-like blockchains. So that's what we were in talking.
Yeah, so as you can see, if you just look at the left side of the slide, it says smart contract oriented blockchain. So smart contract essentially is more for more of storing data, right, and then running applications. So I guess we can see non-EVM and EVM based, and then we look at. Okay, let's talk about the three bigger logos on top. What is the first one? What's the first logo on the left? Yeah,
Solana, right.
Okay, yeah. Next one.
Sorry, what is it?
Solana.
Solana.
Yeah, basically you can slice and dice smart contract oriented blockchain in several dimensions, but the most popular two is EVM based or non-EVM based. EVM means Ethereum virtual machine, and that's the approach. Many blockchain copies of Ethereum because it was well, not because it's the best available, but because it's most popular. It has most documentation and it has most developers. that have experience building the apps, centralized applications on this platform. That's why the EVM-based blockchains are so widespread today.
Who's the founder of Ethereum?
You can
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm just here to ask stupid questions today.
our savior.
Our Terra, yes.
Yeah.
Get it out, yeah.
So what's the thing in the middle?
Lunar.
Yeah.
Terra.
Terra.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Nice.
Terra.
Okay. So how would you if we were to compare Solana and Ethereum, what would be the main difference?
I would say, okay, so there's
Yeah.
probably, I'd say, two main differences. One would be the degree of centralization versus decentralization, and the second would be, well, I guess second and third are transaction cost and speed. So Solana is much faster than Ethereum and much cheaper. Like an Ethereum transaction, even today when the gas fees are low, are still costing you $10 to $20 per transaction, whereas Solana is like 0.0001 cents. So it's quite a large order of magnitude different, but the other thing you have to think about is the decentralization, or how like distributed is the network. So Ethereum is way more decentralized. It was launched in a more decentralized fashion, so there's a lot more, the network that we're talking about, these blockchains, is much more distributed, like on many more computers around the world. There's a wider array of people who are validating this blockchain, as opposed to Solana. It's much more centralized. There's a smaller group of people currently who are the validators maintaining that blockchain ledger. And maybe someone else can talk about
So who here knows what a validator is? Okay,
Please
so
go.
let's do it. Yeah, what is it?
So I mean, like in something like Solana, a validator is somebody who's kind of like what you would consider like a Bitcoin miner back in the day, or like a full validating node of Bitcoin.
Right.
Making sure transactions that are included in blocks are actually valid transactions, and people have the right to say send money from A to B.
Absolutely, yeah.
And not just doing it for
So
reason.
validators, exactly as you said, they act as the one maintaining the network. So the more validators they are, especially if they're not like one entity that has many validators, the more decentralized it will get. So centralization of the network, for example, by Smart Chain, they have 21 validators, and they're all operated by CZ and its friends. So it's very centralized because the control over the network is by one entity or many entities that are working together. As for Ethereum, there's now on the Beacon chain over 300,000 validators. So it means that this network is much more robust, because taking it down or like modifying its state would take, you would have to own or like compromise more than half of these validators, so 150,000 networks instead of just 21 for
Yeah. So I guess like from a user's perspective, because users definitely care about like fee and speed, right? So I think this is why Solana is getting more popular, and getting more popular because it's fast and it's cheap, right?
Yeah.
But as like a developer perspective, like Solana and Ethereum use completely different programming language.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is also why I think like Solana ecosystem now is like much smaller. It's just because you don't use Solidity, like it's not as popular. But over the time, I feel like it's growing, like definitely growing. Yeah.
It's not absolutely different. There's some similarities of how they operate, but the language of coding behind them is different. So you could take any Ethereum application and fork it or copy and deploy it on another EVM compatible blockchain. For example, Phantom, Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche. So
Yeah.
any of those, you could take an app and just copy paste it onto another network. For Solana, it's different. So connecting your application is sort of the same, but the underlying is not the same. So they took Ethereum's code and they copied the functionalities, but they made their own and their way of creating things.
I think it's also worth noting that having fewer validators is not necessarily a drawback. Sometimes it's a feature because not everyone cares about centralization. I mean, the people who are early into the space, they have this as its tenet. I mean, everything should be as decentralized as possible. But it's not true for regular people. I mean, people care about smaller fees, they care about faster transactions. That's why there is a product market fit for blockchains like BSC, Binance Smart Chain, and other blockchains.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of excluding Terra in our conversation. Yeah, so I just want to talk more about Terra. Like, what are some characteristics about Terra you guys can share? Like, today we can talk about from a user's perspective and also from a developer.
All right, from a user's perspective on Terra, so for every blockchain, you have to pay the fees to the miners or the validators. So these are incentives for them to operate these nodes. So you pay them in the native token. For example, in Ethereum, you would pay in Ethereum, right? If the price of Ethereum goes up, which we have seen in the past, then that means your fees are much higher. But as for Terra, you can also pay using UST, the US stablecoin. So that's a major difference.
Yeah, stablecoin, we covered this, like, I'm pretty sure, like, last time, and then
Everyone's a stablecoin.
yeah, the stablecoin it doesn't move, the price doesn't move, it's always $1. Yeah. So I think, yeah.
When you talk about validators, are you talking only about human beings or bots as well? Or
The validators is they're programs that operate.
it's just bots?
Yeah, it's pretty much like bots. So you have to operate a node and deploy the validator contract, and you usually have to have a lot of recurrency. So for Ethereum, you need 32 Ethereum to run a validator node.
So in exchange for this validation, do we receive like proof of work?
Of course, they receive part of the fees.
Got it.
Does anyone have questions about what proof of work is?
Actually, I'd like to clarify. So I've just heard the term.
Of course.
Kind of like proof of work,
Yeah,
proof of stake.
Yeah.
Okay, so proof of work was the kind of like one of the revolutionary concepts that Bitcoin came up with, and that's, you might have heard of, like, Bitcoin mining, and that is when you essentially run the Bitcoin software and you essentially exchange electricity for Bitcoins is what's really happening, and the computer program is running. Essentially, it's like a complex calculation that it's trying to figure out, and all the computers on the network kind of racing to figure out that calculation, and the winner receives rewards in Bitcoin and gets to mine the next block that contains transactions, right? So that was proof of work, and that's what Bitcoin and also Ethereum and things like Dogecoin use. But there's some concerns around, like, the environmental impacts of that is kind of the main thing that people are concerned about. So that's where these proof of stake blockchains come in, and that's most things on here are proof of stake or utilize proof of stake on this side here. And Ethereum is transitioning to proof of stake. That's their plan. It's called the merge. You might have heard about that. They're going to be moving to that. And proof of stake, instead of all the computers or the miners competing with their resources to compete for the next block, what it is the stakers or the validators, they put up a stake. So they'll have, so it's like the minimum is 32 Ethereum, for example, on the Ethereum blockchain, but you stake that, essentially these assets are locked, and then the person who gets to kind of mine the next block, it's random, and you have a higher chance if you have a larger stake in the network. And then if you do mine the next block, you get a reward similar to mining a Bitcoin block. And then you can actually have your stake slashed if you're, like, misbehaving, if you're being, like, malicious, if you're somehow validating transactions that aren't actual. Like, if you, so that, and then the proof of stake is much more environmentally friendly because you're not spending all of this energy on these validation, but it has, like, other drawbacks as well. Someone else wants to, is that good?
Yeah, I mean, all these rules separating proof of work from proof of stake, they are they are defined by Tristan, but also they are kind of flexible. You can have a lot of examples of blockchain that modify those rules and introduce slashing for some other behavior. For I don't know, there are
Downtime.
huh?
For downtime.
Downtown for not being honest, like product calling RPC request they're passing through. It's for specific blockchains. Yeah. So yeah, those rules are kind of flexible.
Okay. Yeah.
I was also wondering, so when you say like if someone does a malicious validation, what exactly does that mean? Like, what do we define as a validation?
If, for example, like the validator nodes could try to create fake transactions, for example. Right? So
To cheat the system.
Or-
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're like double spending when someone tries to like send the same coin twice.
Yeah, anything breaking the protocol, like breaking the rules, introduced prior to that. It could be anything.
Anything illegal, yeah.
Anything illegal.
Is there validators for validators then to like detect those malicious transactions?
That's an interesting question. Well, some blockchains have it. For one, I think Pocket Network blockchain have something like that.
Yeah, we can dive into that later.
Yeah, we can have it in the later. But yeah, they
usually
absolutely have it.
it's the other validators that are keeping everyone in check. So it's a consensus of every person. That's why they call it a consensus mechanism. It's you send a transaction and then everyone has to say, oh, this is true.
Yeah.
Oh, then I guess we can talk about the attack. Right, a little bit? No, okay, let's not go there. Okay. Okay, I have to go there. Okay, but so I guess like so we just to conclude what we just talked about, like basically we talked about these three: smart contract oriented blockchain, and then we call it the first layer. And then as you can see, because there are like other things on like under Ethereum. Yeah, so we call it first layer. Solana is obviously like fast, cheap, right? And Terra is like, oh, you can pay with stablecoins, so with this transaction, so it doesn't really fluctuate. And Ethereum is just most popular, and then like most of the projects just runs on there. Yeah, so it really depends on what the project is trying to achieve. Like if you just want to be more exposed to more people, more users, you go to Ethereum. But the sacrifice you need to make is your user will have to pay more fees, right? Basically. Yeah. So I guess how this is where the layer 2 comes up. Right? Why are there layer 2s? Why are layer 2s?
So a layer 2 is rather than being a separate blockchain so essentially it's addressing the scalability issue that blockchains inherently struggle to scale with a large number of transactions. They become slow and expensive. So there's a few ways around that. One is just creating more blockchains. So these are all examples of most of them are layer 1 blockchains that they've just created their own blockchain and they advertise themselves as faster and cheaper than Ethereum typically. The other thing is a layer 2, which instead of a different blockchain, it's a protocol that builds on top of an existing blockchain. So a good example of that is Polygon, which you can debate whether it's a layer 2 or a side chain, but for this sake, we'll say it can act as a layer 2.
I think they define themselves.
Yeah, they define themselves as a layer 2, right? So the idea is it's its own proof of stake blockchain is what Polygon is, but it also runs parallel to Ethereum, and occasionally, it's called checks in with Ethereum, like checkpoints, and essentially it has the fast speed and low cost of your other EVM blockchains, but it also utilizes Ethereum's security and network effects by the blocks in the Polygon chain checking in with Ethereum and essentially leaving a record of the Polygon activity on Ethereum that can check in, and that way you can have this really fast and efficient Polygon chain that is utilizing Ethereum's much greater security and network effects, and it can utilize all the same applications and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question. Is there a question about what Tristan just talked about? No? Yeah.
Yeah, they say Polkadot is layer 0. How is that different? Polkadot?
Oh, Polygon, yeah.
They say that it's a layer 0 because basically you can run your own chain in it.
Yeah.
How is that different to, for example, having a token in Ethereum, which is...
Oh yeah, that's really interesting because Polkadot it is
Should we wait for Polygon? Should we go there?
No, we can
Yeah, so Polkadot is a protocol of blockchains. Basically, it's it's a mechanism, it's a protocol to organize and cooperate with other blockchains, which is depend on that. Those chains called power chains. So I think there is a limit on the amount of power chains that you could have. It's a 100, I guess, 100. Yeah, and you have to like buy your way into those 100 validators. So in essence, it's it's an abstraction on the blockchains, and Ethereum is a blockchain in itself. So, for example, Polkadot could have an Ethereum-like chain, and already have. So, it's a blockchain of blockchains, so to speak.
But how is it different to just having a token running in the Ethereum network?
Well, it's different because Ethereum is a separate blockchain, and it has token to power its transactions. It's used as gas, and it will be used as stake for validators in Ethereum 2.0. But on Polkadot, the DOT token has some different functionality. It's used as a stake for a power chain to participate in the Polkadot ecosystem, like to buy its way into those 100 validators. So it's completely different tokenomics.
I feel like your question, it really goes down to like, okay, so why do we need so many chains? Yeah, like I feel like for now there are so many, but maybe like 10 years down the road we might just be one, because cause everybody has their own benefit, like, and then yeah, essentially if we all have the consensus, maybe we will just be one. Who knows?
Yeah, my theory behind why so many chains, because as adoption grew in the last 2 years, you've seen the Ethereum fees go up tremendously, and there's some applications that don't necessarily require that level of security, and so many, since it's permissionless, anyone can deploy smart contracts, anyone can create their own decentralized application, and for some users that have less capital, it's better for them to use other chains than Ethereum. And since they have less capital, they don't really care about the risk of losing such capital. So for billions of dollars, Ethereum would be the best. But for some, like for someone who has 10K or 15K, I guess using those side chains can also work. And there's other types of projects also in different blockchains. So for example, Avalanche, the orange one, is now becoming the GameFi chain by excellence. So utilizing their low fees, they attract a certain demographic of people. So for games, for example, it's super fast and cheap to use that, and it's still a blockchain. And it's still using the same technology and the same way of working.
Yeah, I mean, there is some other aspect to that. It's much easier to just start some new product and pump your bags than to buy into the existing chain and deploy its capital less efficiently. So that's probably why we have competing blockchains doing basically the same thing, and they're just slightly different. For one, you can just I don't know, maybe Phantom and Avalanche would be a good example of that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Avalanche is quite different to Phantom, but I don't think it's that different to justify its valuation, but it's just my personal opinion. So that's why we probably have so many chains now, and probably will have less of them in the future.
I think another thing is because, so these are all under, it says smart contract, right? Like smart contract is pre-programmed. So basically, once you make it, you can't change it. So it's called smart contract, but it's not so smart, like that's why things have Ethereum 2.0, they're trying to come up with all the different things because they can't go backwards. So it only goes forward. So this is why there are so many other chains pop up, because they want to try to fix the existing thing. Yeah, so I think that's also why we have so many chains. I'm not sure if that's like,
Yeah, totally. Like
Yeah, that makes sense.
Ethereum couldn't. It wasn't meeting the needs of a lot of people, so other people thought they could do it better, and they realized it was very profitable to do so. So they went ahead and did that.
Yeah, that's probably why we also have so many programming languages, so many like libraries for these programming languages, because everyone thinks that they can do better, you can do better. And of course,
better.
As long as healthy competition pushes the space forward.
yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Otherwise, we will be still using Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess like layer 1 we've done it pretty well. I guess we can talk about these 5 layer 2s, how different they are compared to each other, what they are kind of like. So the first one with yellow like thing in the middle. Does anyone know what they are? What it is? The yellow. This one. Yeah. This is I guess the most centralized. This is smart chain. Okay, never mind. Yeah, okay, yeah, so this is binary smart chain.
Yes.
What's about binary smart chain?
Binance Smart Chain was created by CZ, which he is the creator of Binance. So hence Binance Smart Chain. So Binance is a centralized exchange. So it allows people to trade tokens that are listed. So it's not anyone can have a token, but if you're on there, then you can trade it for any token. And they also use leverage trading. So at first their token BNB was used for the fee of transactions on Binance. And they said, hey, Ethereum's pretty expensive. And most people don't really care about decentralization. Like the small people, they don't care. They just want a cheap and affordable blockchain that works in the same fashion. So they say, hey, we're going to take Ethereum's code, we're going to copy and paste that, and we're going to change how the validation process is made. And instead, we say, okay, we're going to run the network ourselves. And instead of like being decentralized and anyone can run the network, we're going to do it. And it's going to be tremendously faster and cheaper. So that's why they call that Binance Smart Chain.
I have a question. So who has a Binance account? Who's
Guilty.
still using Binance?
Guilty.
You're still using Binance?
Yeah.
Oh, for what?
This is,
Yeah.
getting liquidated? Why the hell not?
I just read so much that they're quite corrupt. Like, is that correct?
Yeah, so I would say like
Actually.
Binance is very user friendly.
Yeah.
And then they're really good at marketing.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So that's why they're so popular.
And they have deep liquidity as well.
Yeah, they have a lot of
Deep,
money
deep,
in
deep
there.
liquidity.
Yeah, but corrupt. Yeah, but so is other. I guess like everyone else.
So it's
in my
like a Canadian
opinion.
government.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's
Because I was trying to decide, and that was one of the articles I read was that their corporate system was corrupt. I don't really understand what that means, but
Yeah.
I'd say it's more like it's hard to know because it's
Yeah.
like they're based in Malta, right? They're offshore. It's really not very transparent to their operations.
Yeah.
So we can't say for sure. We can probably assume there's some shady shit that goes on, but like we can't know for sure.
Yeah, I would say like, if you want to put an analogy, like finance is a door. So basically, like, I go through a door and then I don't care about them anymore. You know, like once you enter this world, like, it's okay like you go through finance because you're not gonna just put your money on finance, right? You're gonna put your money in your wallet or all the different platforms. So, like finance, and like it just because it's user friendly.
It's in use, like the market is so big that there's market fits for a lot of decentralized, non-decentralized, cheap, expensive. Like, the market is so huge that there's so many protocols that will have a place in there. And Binance is one of the key players.
It depends on what your need is. Yeah, actually, yeah. And then so I guess like I had a question. So like Lex brought up DApps. Everybody knows what DApp is, right? Okay. So everyone's like not beginners, nice. Huh?
You don't know?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh.
so
Yeah, we need to go
Yeah,
there.
yeah, then we need to go over that.
yeah, the app is a decentralized application.
Yeah.
So last week we were there, right? So Aave would be a decentralized application. Any application that runs on the blockchain technology, and it allows users to do transactions and anything that they want to do.
It's
It's
just
a
an app.
program that runs on the blockchain.
OpenSea is like, for example, OpenSea is a DApp. You know,
Yeah, DApp and DApp.
Uniswap, like any decentralized exchange is a DApp. Yeah. Your NFT marketplaces, your decentralized exchanges, all of that is.
Okay. Okay, next up, we have 3 logos here, the same thing. So, what's Avalanche? I guess like Lex can talk more about it because he's like,
Oh,
let's talk about Avalanche.
I mean, I like Avalanche. I like Avalanche.
Bullish.
Avalanche, basically it's two things. Avalanche is an ecosystem of chains and subnets. And I guess the most popular version of Avalanche that everybody uses today is called Avalanche C. It's basically it's a form of Ethereum. It's an Ethereum-based blockchain. It's faster. It has much smaller fees because it's less used, and it has less validators. And it has this feature of creating subnets. Subnet is a kind of a separate set of validators for some specific use. For example, if you have a decentralized game application, you would rather have it run on a distinct subnet. It will be faster. It will be much more tailored to the needs of this game, or actually out of the app. So that what separates Avalanche from the rest, and the team seems to be sure that every other blockchain will be eventually an Avalanche subnet. So they have huge plans for that.
Yeah, I think.
I was say like an example like of an Avalanche subnet that just launched is called DeFi Kingdoms. So it's a blockchain. So, yeah, so it's actually really cool to check it out. So basically, it's like it basically it really is a decentralized exchange, but they built like a game on top of the exchange, and it uses like NFT heroes. You can send them on quests and stuff. So it's a very cool experience because it's like you're using like a decentralized exchange with NFTs and stuff, but they turned it into they put like a game skin on top of it. They were on a blockchain called Harmony. I don't know if you have it up.
No.
So anyways, Harmony, another EVM chain. But like Harmony, like I mean, it's fine, but like really the biggest DApp on there was DeFi Kingdoms. And it's basically all the liquidity was on there. Like not many people use it, so they say, okay, we want a better user experience. So now they've kind of taken their game and they have a new like world that they've created on their own Avalanche subnet, and the flexibility has allowed them to kind of customize the blockchain the way they want, rather than having to use Harmony and be restricted by that. They also can set the token they use to pay for gas. So if you're on Ethereum, for example, you have to pay Ethereum for gas fees. If you're on Harmony, you have to pay 1 for gas fees. But now, since they're on an Avalanche subnet, they can use their in-game token called Joule. And not only can you use the Joule token to pay for gas fees, which creates more demand for their token, also they can kind of have more control over these gas fees, and they can keep them cheap. So because for a game, you're doing like hundreds of transactions in an hour, you are spending a lot of money if you're paying like dollars for each transaction.
That's why a lot of like GameFi project, because I'm not sure if you guys have played like GameFi project, like a game on DApp on Ethereum is like super fucking slow. Like it's ridiculous. Like how do you play a game on there? I just don't understand. You know?
It's expensive.
It's super expensive and super slow.
Yeah, I'm saying like you have in a game like the blockchain games, like often every in-game event is like a blockchain transaction, especially DeFi Kingdoms. Like you send your hero on a quest, that's a transaction. You collect them from that quest, that's a transaction, right?
Yeah.
So if you're doing a bunch of that, like on Ethereum, it's just not feasible. It's $20 every time you do that. Like you have to pay like you're gonna spend $1,000 in a day just trying to play this game. It's supposed to be play to earn, so that's what makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. So I came back from Barcelona like 2 weeks ago. I went to Avalanche conference, and then all the projects I encountered with were like mostly GameFi projects. Yeah, so that was kind of interesting. Yeah, so when you think about Avalanche, you think about games, and when you think about we can talk about more. Like when you think about some kind of blockchains, you will think, okay, all of these aspects people don't go through that. That's why, yeah.
think about Binance Smart Chain, you think of scams.
Oh, say that! Yeah, okay, yeah.
I said it, sorry. Sorry, Susie.
Yeah, we had a good time.
Yeah.
We had a good time, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yes.
Okay,
Alright.
yeah. Should we move on to the next? Let's do Arbitrum?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I have one thing about Arbitrum. Like, Arbitrum, to me, I had a really interesting encounter with them. So I was doing option trading, and then like a trade, and then I wanted to cancel the transaction, but it was so fast, I couldn't cancel. It was like, and then usually on Ethereum you can you're like, okay, I want to cancel this, I regret. But like Arbitrum is like, fuck, it's so fast, I can't. Yeah, so that's my thing with Arbitrum. It's very, very fast. Okay.
That's it?
Very fast.
Yeah, well, Arbitrum is a layer 2 for Ethereum. So it uses the same kind of security as Ethereum. And you can bridge your funds on there and use your funds that come from Ethereum natively and use them on other centralized apps that are deployed there. So it uses the same mechanism, so it's EVM as Ethereum. The same apps that run Ethereum work on Arbitrum as well. So it's meant to make the network. So all of that layer 2 is to take some of the transactions that are happening in Ethereum, and there's a limited amount of transactions that you can run on a block. So the more transactions there are, the more costly it is. So for example, when an NFT project is launching, sometimes transactions, just to trade 2 tokens, it costs up to $300 because the network is congested, right? So layer 2 like Arbitrum, they're used to take some of the volume off these main chains so that people can do transactions with the same amount of security edge, and then they can bridge back their funds to the
Okay, questions?
Yeah, other than the technical side about zero knowledge proofs and all that,
Yeah.
Arbitrum,
That's
and also Polygon use, what do you think, how does it make sense for Polygon and Arbitrum to be working more or less on the same things?
Working what? Sorry?
More or less on the same things.
Same page?
Like trying to be a layer 2 for Ethereum, trying to use zero knowledge proofs for making everything faster and
I think it's probably like the main reason we have all of these EVM-based chains. It's like they're competing against each other. They think they see a hole in the market, they see an opportunity, and you just happen to have 2 people trying to kind of fill that same market gap. But there are some differences between them.
Yeah. Like optimism, Arbitrum, ZK-Sync, sharding, everything is like a solution, a potential solution to Ethereum's scaling problem. And eventually, when the merge happens, they're going to use some of these projects, some of these technologies for the mainnet. But all of those are like EVM compatible, so that you can deploy contracts to every of these chains. But they're using different consensus mechanisms, different ways of doing things to do the same thing. And everybody is like doing its own thing. And eventually some of it will be brought back to Ethereum mainnet, some of it won't.
Yeah, it also probably has something to do with the fact that it is really hard to change the consensus of people of some community representing some blockchain. It's much easier to just start something from scratch. Like Vitalik did with Ethereum, because he just couldn't convince Bitcoiners to implement smart contract features in Bitcoin for the reasons. And he just decided to start with Solar. And like probably many of these solutions, not all of them, but many of these solutions is here is actually for the same reason. People just wanted to start from scratch their hypothesis, and through the competing with enough solutions, they just basically will be coming up with a winner, winning solution, which will be incorporated by the rest of the time.
Okay, yeah, so with that being said, all the EVM-based chains, I think, so for example, I have Matic from Polygon, and then I have Avax from, and then I want to I would say, okay, so how do they communicate? Like, I think these chains communicate through bridges, right? So that's why they call it that's why they're kind of like tied under the same like category, and if you think about like if you want to do this to here, it's just further and it's more complicated. Yeah, so this is why they're all under the same category.
Yeah, also, bridges is a whole another topic. I don't think we can cover it in this evening. It's very deep. Yeah. But generally, some of those systems has some means for interoperability. And some of them does not. So, for example, Polygon has this means, Avalanche doesn't have it yet. And I'm not sure if we can make some predictions based on that, but probably the chains or protocols that have some innate means to make their subchains interoperable will be a huge advantage of the rest of the pack. I think it was Vitalik who said that he is bullish on multi-chain future, but he's not bullish on multi-bridge future.
He said not cross-chain.
Yeah.
Yes, multi-chain, not cross-chain.
Yeah, because bridge introduces a whole new risk of your funds being stolen. So let's say if the token of Ethereum on Ethereum has much better security than like a rob if on some other blockchain, just because the bridge introduces this new risk.
Yeah, so I would think of bridges as like a translator, and so we can there say like Avalanche and Polygon, they don't speak the same language, so there's no translator in between them yet. But maybe down the road when people see the need, they'll build it.
Yeah. So when you mentioned like your tokens getting stolen, what does that look like exactly? Just a zebra? Or like you're like, oh, it's a security issue.
Oh right, yeah. Basically, bridge. What bridge does in its essence, it just locks up your token from some blockchain and issue another rough version of this token on another blockchain. But what it also means is that this bridge actually holds your token, and this is a huge hype for so it's a huge attraction to hackers.
So they message the other blockchain. So they say, oh, okay, I'm depositing one Ethereum here, and on the other blockchain, they will message the other blockchain to say, here, I have someone who has Ethereum here, and that's there. But the tokens are still held somewhere. That's when they get hacked. So for example, the wormhole hack. So
pretty recent, pretty popular.
Yeah, pretty popular on Solana. There was $200 million worth of ETH that disappeared because of a security risk on the server. So someone took control of the servers, and then they could access $200 million.
Another example, I guess, is the running bridge.
Yeah. Oh shit.
What was stolen like $600 million?
$600 million.
Yes. 3 clicks.
So they have any idea what
The
True.
The wormhole was the problem in the contract.
That's right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
wormhole is the problem. Yeah.
Say that again. The world.
Wormhole.
It's the contract.
There was just a flaw.
It was a flaw.
Yeah. Then with the Ronin bridge hack, that was like the validator compromise or something like that, right? Yeah. So it just introduces all kinds of different security risks into the system, which is why it's hard doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And you see the evidence of it in all this thing, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of this.
Yeah, and probably when it comes to blockchain, the simpler is better, because you just have less surface for making a mistake or
More transparent.
more transparency. Yes, everybody understands your source code better when it's small. So probably that was the reason Bitcoiners just brushed off Vitalik's concerns and attempts to integrate smart contracts features into Bitcoin, because they wanted to be as secure, as simple as possible, because it's kind of like a fundamental layer.
Yeah. They're like, okay, well, we already created one. Why do you guys need so many more? Something like that. Yeah. So we covered Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, and Arbitrum. So now we have Polygon and Phantom. So I guess like before we talk, I'll just like tell you a little bit of story about like how I interact with each chain, I guess. Like I used to run a project on Polygon. So the reason why we did that was because running on Polygon is so much cheaper than running on Ethereum. So that was the only reason why we did that. But later on, when we launched our project, we realized that there aren't many users on Polygon, and the crowd wasn't the people we wanted to attract. Yeah, so that's why. Yeah. So like every blockchain, every chain has different users, and they're kind of like, it could be geographically like together, or just same kind of traits. And yeah, so like for Polygon,
how would you characterize an undesirable user?
Lex can answer that.
That's a good question. Undesirable relative to what we have. We first have to understand the ecosystem we're in, right? So I'm not sure about Polygon, but undesirable user for some different blockchain is completely different. So we can't just generalize it, I guess.
I guess, okay, so
did you have a qualification process?
No.
Or an admission, process?
No, like for undesirable users will be, okay, let's say, okay, we're gonna announce, hey, we're gonna do an airdrop, and everybody just comes for money, and then they don't want to contribute to any work, and it's just annoying because like you're here to, like it's not a one-way street, right? So I guess that's one, and then another one is, I don't know, try to cheat the system. That's not good too. But yeah, but going back to Polygon, like there's another thing I really didn't like about Polygon is because the network is super unstable. And then yeah, it's just super unstable, and then like it could be gone for like 6 hours.
So outages.
Yeah. So and then you have to think about this. If the whole network is gone, all the projects under that network don't work. Yeah, it's fucking crazy.
So there's a difference between freezing up and
and then
total loss of it, right?
Yeah, and then what happens during those hours that are down? Like we don't know what happens, And then
nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then so I gave Polygon a name. It's called Polygon. I was like, that really? Polygon. Yeah.
I have a question
Yeah.
about decentralization and how that impacts outages. You're talking about how centralized chains can often be very fast and efficient. How does that impact in cases of outages, in case centralized validators go down?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, the more decentralized, the less prone they are to outages. So, for example, I'm not exactly sure what happened with Polygon. It's probably an issue with validators, right? Since the people operating the network, there's so few of them. If they go out, then the network is complete, right? Whereas Ethereum is like peer-to-peer, so it would take, you would have to shut down pretty much the whole network in order for the network to be down. So the more decentralized it is, the less there's a risk of it being actually. So that's very interesting.
How many Ethereum nodes are there in the world, do you know?
Last time I checked, on B2 chain, the validators, there's 300,000.
300.
So that's times 32 Ethereum, that amounts to about 7.
And they're geographically all around the world.
Yeah. But some nodes have a lot of validators in them, so you can put more in one. You can have many. So I could have like 1,000 ETH in one node. But there's 300,000.
What's the difference between a node and a validator?
A node could be a single node, or it could also be a validated node. So a node is just a
full copy of the blockchain.
It's a full copy of the network, and you can extract value from it. So you could like operate smart contracts on this node, or you could have a virtual node for testing. But essentially, a validating node is a node that has enough Ethereum to validate the network.
Yeah.
So every validator would be a node, but not every node would be a node.
Yeah, also there's two terms, validator and a node, sometimes means different things in different blockchains. So that's why I don't really like to generalize things, because they are so flexible. And talking back to the undesired users, it's hard to generalize as well, because some users which will be undesired in some projects or blockchain are very welcome in the other. Like the users who tries to cheat the system but brings liquidity. In some projects, like who cares? They bring liquidity, they HTML, so that's all it is.
Or any.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, just a little preview. So we're using a lot of like technical terms, and then we were like when we were in the meeting discussing about like what we should talk about. We're gonna do basically like a how do you use this word in a sentence? So I think that will be easier for like people to understand what those words actually mean. So when we talk about node, then we can talk about like how do we use this word onto different sentences. So that's in the future, but I'm just like a little preview for it. Yeah. How do you talk like a DJ? Yeah.
For EVM, does the VM here means like the traditional like Web 2 VM? And why does it matter if it's containerized or not?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, like EVM, like virtual machine, does that mean the same thing in Web 2 where virtual machine is like, virtual box?
Say like kind of, but it's like it's the specific like Ethereum virtual machine. So you have it's basically the Ethereum network is this big like essentially global computer that can perform calculations and stuff.
Yeah, so Ethereum virtual machine is a specific kind of virtual machine, I guess, designed to process assembly, the code which Solidity or Viper translates to. So it's just a specific kind of virtual machine, but it's not related to like emulating Windows on Mac or something like that. It's something completely different. It's just a term.
I mean, it's Turing complete with enough gas. You can do whatever you want.
You just sounded like Metallic.
MS-DOS on Ethereum.
So the EVM runs on Ethereum,
Yes.
right?
Okay. EVM means Ethereum
Virtual machine.
virtual machine.
Yeah, in some sense, probably we argue that.
And what do you run on the virtual machine?
On EVM.
Yeah, what do you run on?
GIOPS.
Like these run on the virtual machine. Ethereum virtual machine. Yeah.
Oh no, you mean what is run on virtual machines or which what can use virtual machines?
No, just what DApps,
They use the Ethereum virtual machine to perform the functions and the calculations in smart contracts.
Well,
So it's kind of an interpreter, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Good. So I guess we covered smart contract oriented blockchain. Is there any questions about the left side of the thing? No? No? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, because all the markets moving narratives, I remember when Binance, like, rallied, everything was about cheap transactions, everything was about Ethereum being, like, having such high gas fees and all that. So my question is, why would people move from Binance's smart chain to a chain like Solana? That is also centralized, that also has like similar like why would they leave? When you mention something about when you think BSC, think about scams, was that part of the narrative back then? Because as I remember, it was more or less Binance Smart Chain, then Polygon, then Avalanche, now Solana, and at the very least, I think Polygon and Avalanche was because there were so many incentives and the yields they were paying were so high, people just migrated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, when I mentioned that, like when you think about Binance Smart Chain, you think about scams because before Ethereum, I remember back in 2018, not many people were in the space, so it was very limited space, like limited people, and then it became more mainstream with Binance Smart Chains. More people were taking staking contracts, like O2, for example, and they were just creating that on Binance Smart Chain and rebranding everything. But it was the same programs that ran and were. So the innovation happened on Ethereum, and people were taking that and changing it on, like taking that and copying it on Binance Smart Chain and trying to rebrand. Oh yeah, we're on Binance Smart Chain for something completely different, but it was the same underlying programs, and it was just a bump and dump. Like high inflationary token pumping, and then people would just crash the price and run the money. So that happened a lot on Binance Smart Chain. There's not much innovation there. It was just a way to have cheaper fees and still a blockchain kind of more or less anonymous way of like scamming. So there's a lot of scams on there. And when other narratives were spinning, there was grants by say Polygon Foundation on Aave and on say QuickSwap and other exchanges there. So there were liquidity incentives there. So the capital moves with the yields and with the possibility of making money. So that's why during those times, in the upbringing of those blockchains, there were incentives for people because it's a zero-sum game in the end, right? When you win something, someone else loses at the end.
Yeah.
But when the chains get funded, sometimes they have incentives. So they're free money available. It's not someone else who loses. It's grants from these foundations to use their products. But when these dry up, capital moves away and goes to a better place.
Yeah, and I think we can also just argue that all those blockchains that emerge, those were basically founder coming to a VC saying something like, okay, I can wrap up this narrative and people probably will buy it and I can execute it and give me the money. And he got money, and the VC are usually pretty influential on Twitter or in well connected, so they are able to put up this pump and it up eventually and just move to another thing. So it's just a factor of narratives.
I think if we look at it from what you were talking about, like, okay, so first thing, Binance, right? When you try to enter this space, you would look at Binance first, and then you'll be exposed to Binance Chain. And then, as a user, right? I'm a user right now. Okay, I go into Binance, I discover Binance Chain, I use dApps on Binance Chain, I get scammed, I'm like, okay, fuck. Like, I know this is a scam now, I go to another chain, which I might go to Ethereum because, you know, like, Ethereum is like the white horse, everybody loves it, right? And then I go to Ethereum, I realize, oh, Ethereum's actually kind of slow, so I want to try something and it's kind of expensive. So I kind of want to try to explore like other chains. And then there was Polygon. Polygon was one of the first like more popular, I guess, like layer 2. Yeah, so I'll go to Polygon and then I realize there aren't many good dApps or good users or not many people on Polygon. So it's like kind of empty. So I will go to and then like Avalanche come up with all the games and stuff. You're like, oh, that's so cool, right? So I'll go to Avalanche. So people are just like hopping around. Yeah, and yeah, so this is like how, this is for me, like,
and someone have to serve those narratives to public too, so people realize, okay,
beat it. That was like a lot of fun. I got rugged a couple of times also, that's funny, but yeah, it was fun. But I guess now there's not many new chains popping, but like, whenever there's a new chain and new incentives, that's what you want to look for. Because on Polygon, there's a huge incentives on Aave. I talked about that last week. I used that and I was farming, new tokens because you're not actually stealing from someone. You're just kind of stealing from the foundation. There's incentives to do that, so it's guaranteed liquidity and guaranteed rewards. So yeah, I use Avalanche as well. I use a lot of blockchains, but mostly just arbitrage. Also, like a store value on Bitcoin. But yeah, if you're storing value, you want to go for the more decentralized, more secure. And if you want to do plays and types and all that, and actually do the network, I guess they do.
I'd say like pretty similar to these guys. Like Bitcoin, again, yeah, it's kind of like buy and hold. Actually, I had a job where I sent 2 Bitcoin transactions for the job. Like, we paid someone in like Nigeria or something in Bitcoin, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, Ethereum for NFTs, but like I don't use Ethereum. I try not to use too much of Ethereum just because like I'm pretty poor, so I can't.
That's what we all say.
I obviously I love Ethereum. It's great. Like user experience is not that great, but like it's the golden child. Everyone loves it. I like it too. Just I don't try to be too active on it. I think same as Lex. Like my daily one would be Avalanche. Avalanche is because it's like a really good user experience, but it doesn't have that limiting fees of Ethereum. And for most of my DeFi, I'd say is on Avalanche. Solana, I did a bit of NFT trading like last year, but like I don't know, it's not the greatest. I also did like an event with my company on DeFi on Solana, but when I did it, I realized like it's not the greatest for DeFi. Like it's fast and cheap, but in terms of the yields and stuff, like it wasn't really enticing for me, so like not worth my time and effort, but maybe that'll change. And basically, if you look at any of the DeFi tokens in Solana, they're just like that.
It's because we don't have enough liquidity in there, right?
Yeah, and well, I mean, all those tokens are like super high VC concentrations and highly inflationary, and basically people just took the tokens and dumped them. So I like Solana, but I don't like to use Solana, I guess. Yeah. And then like Binance Smart Chain, exactly the same. Like in 2020, like. Yeah, you were basically, it was like the grand casino. Like you put in $100 and either it was 100x or it goes to zero or something. So actually, like I think I made out with more than I put in, but just like pure luck basically. I think at the end of the day.
BSC, you can put 300 and it would be like 10K in 2 months.
It took 2 minutes sometimes.
Other than that, like I don't
TikTok.
I don't really like use any of the others on like a daily basis at all. I've played around with them for sure, but they're not part of like my daily activities by any means.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Question.
Anyone have experience with Near?
Near. We want to put that in there.
Haven't used it, but I think we're just talking about going for the blockchain with incentives. I think Near just came out with like new incentive thing, and they're launching with their own like stable coin now, their algorithmic stable coin, so it could be an opportunity there, you know, some degenerate stuff.
All go stable coins.
But in terms of, I haven't actually like used it. Although there is he's not here, he's in Portland right now. This guy, he loves Near. He's like done a bunch of development on Near, so maybe like next week he might be here. You can chat with him. He's the Near guy.
Adrian? No, Oliver.
From BC blockchain.
Oh, right. The guy,
Yellow guy.
he lives and breathes.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, how do you guys generate yield in DeFi without risking or without taking any permanent loss risk?
I don't think is there a solution to that?
There's some permanent loss protection.
So there's Rune, there's Thorchain.
Thorchain,
yes. So Thorchain has an incentive that as long as you're staking for 100 days, you have 100% impairment loss free. So it's because it's actually staking the native token on it.
Yeah, but you need half of it to be ruined. So.
Yep, that's the whole narrative happening now.
Single token staking?
No, so it needs to be paired with Rune, and that's the whole narrative behind it.
They cover that impermanent.
Yeah, as long as you're holding, so it's just a log function, and it's going down as long as you're holding it, and past 100 days, it's 100% impermanent loss.
Another way you can avoid impermanent loss is if you're either yield farming with 2 stable coins or an asset and a wrapped version of that asset, so like ETH and staked ETH, because then those are like 1-to-1 correlated, so you'll never have any impermanent loss, it'll be very negligible. There's also single-sided staking, so a select few apps will offer you can just stake 1 coin and farm that one, and then you're also not exposed to the impermanent loss. But besides that, actually there's also Uniswap v3, which is really complicated, but basically you can like control the range in which you supply liquidity that lets you minimize the impermanent loss. And then one more thing was like Popsicle Finance, I think it was, or maybe it was I can't remember Popsicle or a different one of those, those apps, right? Tied in with the Wonderland fiasco. It was basically like it was an automated solution for liquidity providing that was specifically designed to just hands-off invest yield farm, minimizing impermanent loss. I don't know the state of the protocol now. But.
Also, you could select 2 assets that move together, and then the impermanent loss would be mitigated. That's like your risk strategy.
But generally, don't use two assets to farm, just use 1 asset. Just pull 1.
This push pull is no 2. Unless you really like know what you're doing.
I'm pretty curious like how everybody is focused on. Like, do you guys like DeFi, GameFi? Like, what are you interested in?
Yeah, so for me, I think I'm really big on the Cosmos ecosystem, and I think it's like interoperability. So for me, it's about use any asset, and then for fees, you can use any other asset and allow them to interact. So actually, I'm very curious about Polkadot and then having Kusama as a parachain, and how there's a whole, I guess, different narrative with Cosmos and now AVAX coming to as subnets, which I think it will be more corporation focused and gamified. So really curious on that. And I think I mostly spend my time in Terra and Cosmos.
Yeah, so the thing about this ecosystem is that that's so diverse, so it's nearly impossible to know everything. So we have to focus on some specific niches of that, or even just slice them even more and focus on them.
Yeah, we can break it down into like different events and then just come back to it. Yeah, but I guess like okay, so there's DeFi. I'm like 90% DeFi and like 10% NFT. Yeah, so like if everybody's more interested about DeFi, we can talk about more about DeFi. Like, so what do you guys, or like devs? Yeah.
I'll give my thoughts. So I think what kind of got me into the Web3 space was I was interested in biotechnology, and there's this DeFi movement going on with organizations like VitaDAO, Molecule, LabDAO. So that was like my gateway drug. And I think now I'm like really interested in the user experience of different product designs for essentially like Web3 products, right? Like recently I met the CEO of Airfoil, and he was like a super dope dude, like designs for Solana Pay, like Drip Protocol, and then that got me like really curious about how these different products differentiate themselves in the marketplace, because I feel like as blockchain becomes more productized and consumerized, that's going to be like a huge factor, especially when like indoctrinating the masses, you know, to like teach and dumb. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
I think one thing about why the UI and UX is so bad is because from my experience, right, from working with developers, you don't know if this product is gonna work. So why investing so much time on the UI and UX to just make it perfect instead of, you know, like testing to see, okay, this theory works, and then we'll like work on the UI and UX. Yeah, so this is why like UI and UX is so bad.
Yeah, that a lot of sense, but some products just use perfect or better UI as a huge market advantage and just pay away with it. Like Avalanche Bridge, for example. This bridge is superior. It's just perfect. It just works. And I think they also have some memes about that. Like I like the bridge. Or something like that.
I like the bridge. Oh, one thing I do want to talk about though, like it's my. I really like this project. It's called Layer Zero with Stargate. Yeah, like I love it. Like just like there's so potentially what it's doing is, so for example, I want to I guess like cross chain, do multiple like transactions. I have to go to this exchange, and I'll go to I'll go to another page, go to a bridge, and then I have to like go back to the exchange. You know, like go to like different platforms. But essentially what Layer Zero and Stargate are doing together is you can just use 5 buttons and do all the things, you know, like, for example, like before it was like 48 buttons, and then now it can only like under 5 clicks. So yeah, that's why I'm really bullish about it. Yeah.
So that's Layer Zero on Stargate.
Yeah. Anything else? Because I guess like we can quickly go through this.
Yeah, I think we're
we spent a lot of time on those ones.
Yeah.
I mean, like Bitcoin, I think is like maybe not self-explanatory, but I think it's the most well-known one, right? You know, we talked about proof of work, which is the big thing. You know, and Dogecoin is a fork of Bitcoin, right? So it was actually created as like a joke or a meme currency. Exactly, the guy was like making fun of it. That's the thing. So yeah, it started out as a joke. It was worth like a fraction of a cent, nothing, and you know, it's a bit different in the sense that it's faster and cheaper. It's inflationary as opposed to Bitcoin, which is like deflationary. But then Elon Musk, who he came across it, and he's like, wait a minute, if blockchain was originally invented to facilitate cheap peer-to-peer transactions over the internet, he's like, wait, maybe Dogecoin can actually do that if we change it a little bit, whereas Bitcoin is like too far gone to kind of facilitate that type of exchange. It's better for like a kind of store of value situation now, or at least that's the narrative. I think
or it's meme enough to pump it.
That's the thing. Memes are so powerful these days. You know, Dogecoin, GameStop, AMC, all that stuff. It's all just memes.